Good afternoon. My name is Caleb Alexander. I'm a practicing internist and a prescription drug researcher at Johns Hopkins, where I co-direct the Johns Hopkins Center for Drug Safety and Effectiveness. And I have two messages today. The first is to let you know that thanks to the efforts of people like you, and tragically after far too many injuries and deaths, the clinical community is finally beginning to understand the scope of this epidemic and to do something about it. When I was in residency training, we were routinely taught that one need not worry about the addictive potential of opioids, and that if a patient had true pain. We were taught things that, however well-intentioned, turned out to be dead wrong, and that led us to overestimate the effectiveness of these drugs, as well as to underestimate their risks. You've heard the startling facts, and many of you have lived these firsthand. How is it that the United States accounts for 5% of the world's population and more than 80% of all the prescription opioids consumed? How is it that high school students report that prescription drugs are second only to marijuana in terms of ease of access? How is it that in 2010 enough prescription opioids were prescribed in the US to supply every adult a 4-week continuous round-the-clock supply of Vicodin? Since pain is common and commonly undertreated, some have framed efforts to rein in runaway prescribing as a threat to quality of care. But nothing could be further from the truth. An overwhelming amount of evidence supports efforts to reduce our reliance on opioids because of their addictive potential, the number of safer alternatives, and the unacceptably high rates of injury and death associated with their use. As the late Daniel Moynihan reminded us, everyone is entitled to his or her own opinion, but not his or her own facts. And when it comes to prescription opioids, the jury is not still out. High-quality care for patients in pain isn't jeopardized by such efforts, it demands it. My second message is not just for you, but for the federal government as well. After all, this coalition is called FedUp for a reason, right? The fact of the matter is that our federal government can play an important role in maximizing the safe use of medicines such as opioids. Indeed, just as with individual prescribers, individual doctors, the government can be part of the problem or part of the solution to this epidemic. An epidemic that's having catastrophic impacts on families and communities and is placing tremendous strain on our healthcare system, businesses, and local and state governments. This past May at Johns Hopkins, we were fortunate to be joined by President Clinton for a town hall that focused exclusively on this epidemic. And this event, which included a panel discussion with Senator Amy Klobuchar, FDA Commissioner Margaret Hamburg, and the Honorable Patrick Kennedy, is but one of hundreds of similar events and conversations taking place around the country as we continue momentum in the midst of an important tipping point. This is a steamship, and as you've heard from some other speakers, there aren't any magic bullets here that will bring an abrupt end to this epidemic, let alone restore the lives lost. But elements of our platform do offer great promise in reducing prescription drug addiction and abuse and preventing further harm. Our federal government is here to serve the people, and when it comes to this, one of the greatest public health challenges of our generation, we need to allocate more funding for evidence-based treatment and prevention programs. We need to ensure that public and private health insurance carriers adequately reimburse evidence-based addiction treatment programs. We need to improve legal protection for naloxone use with a federal Good Samaritan law. And we need to support more effective and widespread use of electronic prescribing and prescription drug monitoring programs to identify individuals in need of addiction treatment as well as reckless prescribers. We've had great public health victories before in the past century, such as the startling reduction in motor vehicle deaths that were achieved all the while with huge increases in the number of miles traveled on roads in the United States. So for the Steve Rumlers and the Emily Jacksons, the Benjamin Guptas, the Michael Israels, the hundreds of thousands who have lost their lives or been injured or otherwise impacted from these prescription drugs, we represent a single and increasingly powerful voice, and we are turning the steamship around. Thank you for the privilege of joining this important cause and for sharing your stories with me. It's the faces behind this epidemic, the lives that have been touched, that provide us a very path to our success. Thank you.